Top of the morning to you laddies! My name is Jacksepticeye, and in this video I'm going to give you some suggestions on how to play better in a tank in Battlefield 3. Now, some people may not agree with the loadout that I have for my tank, or maybe some of the techniques that I use for getting around the battlefield, but this sort of setup works out really well for me. I've been using this loadout and these sort of tactics for the last couple of months, and every time I get into a tank I seem to do pretty well for myself. It's not perfect, there's probably room for improvement, so if any of you guys have any suggestions for it, please leave them in the comments below and I will definitely try and incorporate them into my playstyle to try and make it better, because it's all about trying to help you guys and trying to help me at the same time. I'm learning just as much as you guys, so I hope these tips can help some people out who are kind of reluctant to get into a tank because it's kind of intimidating. Some of my loadout has been given away already. You can see that I'm using thermal optics. I'm also using my canister shell, and I've got reactive armor on too. Now, the reasons I chose these are reactive armor is a complete no-brainer. Everybody should have reactive armor on for if you're using AA or a tank or anything like that. Anything that can equip reactive armor, you should be using it. It gives you a little bit more time to react, as the name suggests, and it means you're not going to die as fast, and you might be able to get away from a hairy situation, or you might be able to get out and repair yourself a lot quicker. I use thermal optics instead of smoke. A lot of people would probably say to use smoke because it lets you get rid of lock-ons and you can avoid choppers for a lot longer, stuff like that, but I really like my thermal optics. They let me see enemies from further away, they let me see them a lot easier. There are times when I can drive into a base, especially a map like this where you have a lot of rocks, you have a lot of cover for people to hide in, and the thermal optics really let me see guys a lot sooner than I would without it. For the last part of my loadout, like I said before, I'm using the canister shell. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what the canister shell is, or you were confused by it in the loadout menu and you didn't really equip it, it's basically a shotgun for your tank. And what this does is fire a big chunk of pellets or balls at the enemy, similar to what a shotgun would do in like buckshot. So it fires this big wad and it spreads out the further it goes, just like a shotgun. So this is really, really good for taking out infantry. It's basically just an infantry weapon. You can fire it at choppers and do damage to them, and you can hit jeeps and smaller vehicles with it and you can take them out, but you can't do any damage to other tanks with it. I got used to using it when the game launched and I kind of never really got rid of that affection towards it. Before, you used to be able to fire a tank shell or a canister shell first, then quickly press F and switch out to your next weapon and fire that off in really rapid fire quick succession. Now, DICE patched this out, and I agree with their decision to do it. I hated it when they did do it, but the more I played, the more I realized that tanks were extremely overpowered in the launch of Battlefield 3. You used to be able to, like, you could fire a canister shell, and if you hit a guy with it, but you didn't kill him, you just took a bit of damage off him, then you could quickly change straight to your tank shell, and you were able to fire that in anywhere in his local area, and the splash damage used to take care of the rest of him. So it was really overpowered, and now what you have to do is wait for the barrel to be empty, and then you can fire off your second shot. And this really makes sense because that's what you'd have to do in real life. You can't fire two shots at the same time out of one barrel. So now you gotta fire a tank shell, wait for your round to reload, even if you switch weapon, and then you're able to fire off the second round. So I agree with DICE's decision to do this. Now, let's actually talk about driving the tank around the battlefield. This might seem like common sense, but a lot of people overlook it, and it can be really detrimental to you whenever you're actually driving your tank. A lot of people don't actually know still. I've gotten into tanks with them, and they still don't know that you can hold shift to make your tank go faster. I'm sitting there in the tank in the gun, and I'm thinking, just drive faster, get to the objective quicker. But it still boggles my mind that a lot of people don't know this, and you wouldn't really know it because it's just written in like the load screens for each map. It can say press shift to boost your vehicle speed, and it only works in like tanks and AA. It doesn't work in jeeps or quad bikes or anything like that. So for any of you who don't actually know that you can boost your tank, you can. Just hold shift and you'll drive faster, or whatever your sprint key actually is if you're playing on console. The downside to this though is that you lose a lot of maneuverability in your tank whenever you're sprinting. What I like to do is sprint on straight roads. If you have a road that doesn't have a lot of bends on it, or the bends aren't too sharp, you can usually just sprint your whole way down that road. But if you have to turn sharply, then you really got to ease your foot off the sprint. Now, a road like this You could sprint your whole way towards A if you wanted to. The roads aren't that sharp. You could, it's pretty much straight the whole way there. But when you come down to a place like C here, I sprint my whole way down to a place like this, then take my foot off it, turn, and then sprint my way out of it again. This will increase the efficiency of maneuverability and speed in your tank. It is the fastest way that you will get to your objective without losing control. Now, I know what you're thinking. Anyone who knows this stuff, it's really common sense, and I'm not trying to sound condescending to anybody, it's just that I've gotten into so many tanks with people, and they just don't know how to drive. They spin out all the time, they don't sprint towards objectives, and it gets really, really frustrating. So this tip is kind of for the people who don't know this kind of stuff and who want to improve their game properly in a tank. Another great tip for driving in a tank, and this kind of goes for Battlefield in general, and I can't stress this enough, is to always stay mobile. In other words, just stay moving all the time. Whether you're in a tank, you're in the AA, you're in a Jeep, you're on foot, anything at all, just stay moving all the time. What this is going to do is make you a much harder target to hit. The last thing you want to do is stay still in a tank. You can see I kind of did it there. Thankfully, my gunner got that support guy. But you just want to keep going, even if it's just forward, back, all the time. Engineers are going to want to destroy your ass when you're in a tank. That's their job. Most guys are running around with an RPG, and that has to fire in a straight line. So when that fires in a straight line, if you're moving back and forward all the time, that's going to make you much harder to hit with an RPG. So they're either going to miss, they might hit, or they're going to have to wait to fire off the shot, and that gives you a little bit more time. Another reason for moving all the time is that support guys are going to want to plant C4 all over your shit. They're going to be all over you. They're going to crawl up behind you all the time. So you're either going to be able to drive away and they're not going to get all their C4 on you, or you're just going to drive over them. A lot of the time, a guy has come up behind me trying to put C4 on my back, and I've just backed straight out over him and got a roadkill. So always stay moving, just forward, back, whenever you're at an objective. Never sit still, and it makes you a much harder target to hit. If you're going to be playing in a tank, or if you plan on playing in any of these bigger vehicles for any length of time, you should be playing as an engineer. The reason for this is repair torch. You're going to have time to be able to get out and repair your own vehicle. If your tank gets disabled, you shouldn't just get out and run away from it. I've seen so many people just get out and say, oh, my tank's disabled, it's going to be blown up in a minute, I better just run away before I die in the explosion. No, you should stay with your tank and try and repair it at least once. You can see here, I am winning this gunfight because I actually got out and repaired the tank. Only because I got out and repaired, the tank wouldn't be alive and I'd be blown up by now. So if you get out and run away, your tank is still usable to a certain degree, so you're wasting that potential. Of course, this isn't a foolproof strategy. There are times when you're going to get out and you're going to try and repair your tank, and the guys are just going to blow you up who are shooting you anyway. But it's the risk you got to take to keep your tank alive. Tanks are so important to the flow of battlefields, almost like aircraft in a way. They can change the tide of battle completely, so you shouldn't just bail on your tank and get out and run away, and then if you die, just go respawn and get another one. You should stay with your tank for as long as possible and try and keep it alive for as long as possible. Something that can be overlooked really easily when you're in a tank is how you position yourself in firefights. Your tank does not take the same amount of damage from every single direction. It's going to take more damage from the back. Those are where the vents of the tank are, and that is where the maximum damage for a tank can be dealt. You also take a lot of damage from the side. These are where the treads of the tank are, so it kind of acts like immobilizing the tank. But your tank takes the least amount of damage from the front, where the nose is. So something that is really, really important to learn is to always angle your tank towards your enemy whenever you get into fights. This is something that can go out of your head extremely easily when you're in the heat of battle. I do it a lot myself. I kind of forget to do it here. Well, this guy is missing a lot, so I feel like I'm not in any danger. But you always want to angle the nose of your tank towards the enemy. If you give them a chance to hit you at the side or the back, they're going to be able to take you out sooner than you're going to be able to take them out. So by angling your tank towards them, you give your tank the best fighting chance whenever you go into a tank versus tank situation. And likewise, you should use this knowledge against your enemy. Always try and attack them from the side if you're able to. If you can hit them in the back, you should definitely go for it. This is where you're going to do maximum damage towards them. But you should be able to at least hit them from the side depending on what way you're fighting them. So always try and avoid head-on contact. Now, another little cheeky tactic you could use, and I don't really recommend this like all the time, but you can ram your opponent. The collision detection in Battlefield 3 is a bit freaking sketchy at times, as all of you know who have played in any vehicles. So what can happen is, especially if you're in a head-on collision, it usually works that the person with the momentum will end up going under the other person. So if you're driving a tank, because the nose of them is angled, I've usually been able to drive and get the other guy to go out over me. So what happens is I can get a few rounds off into him while he's trying to realign himself, and he can't fire his barrel down because, as everyone knows, the tanks can only fire in a certain range of motion. So if he's above you, he can't fire down. So this gives you a few shots off against him before he can hit you again. And sometimes it helps you win gunfights, but like I said, it's not recommended because the opposite outcome can happen, and this really backfires against you. So always be wary when using this. But if you're in kind of a no-holds-barred, kind of desperate situation, then just go for it because you don't really have anything to lose. And that's basically all the advice I have to give on tanks. Like I said before, this is for my playstyle. This works really, really well for me. I have a good time when I'm in a tank when I have this setup and this loadout. But if you guys have some other suggestions or any sort of feedback or advice about tanks or any information that I might not have covered, please leave it in the comments below. I really, really encourage that. Leave feedback, leave anything. We all are trying to learn here. We're all trying to help each other. I'm still trying to learn myself. So anything that you guys can leave in the comments so we can all have a read would be really, really appreciated. But thank you guys so much for watching. Click the annotations at the end for more stuff that Jacksepticeye has done, and punch that like button in its face. But thank you guys, and I will see all you dudes in the next video!